good evening. I'm Ritika Singh, and I would like to welcome you all to yet another episode of Manav Rachna Happy Times. Each time that I welcome you, I'm surprised how quickly the week has passed. And before I can begin, I would like to thank everyone who has been a part of this journey and helped us come to this point. We really appreciate your positive comments and encouragement for this initiative. It's very satisfying when we hear our guests mention that Manav Rachna Happy Times has inspired them. I personally look forward to it every week now. The whole idea of Manav Rachna Happy Times is to bring a smile on everyone's face, and in these times to leave everyone feeling motivated and inspired after they hear our experts speak, and also to find out those little things that make a difference to the life of our experts and makes them who they are. But before I can further begin, we have a very short presentation and a video. I would say I would request my colleague Agam to please play the video. Thank you so much. We were able to see so many familiar faces as we saw this short video, and it's very beautifully capturing all the moments of your life, I believe. But before we begin our interaction with our expert and guest for today, I would also like to request Dr. Amit Bhalla to please welcome our guest and all the other guests who are watching us right now live from Facebook and through this program.
Thank you, Ritika. So, Russell, it's always a pleasure to welcome you. You saw one of my picture. I was also recollecting that picture was without the beard, and now I have my beard with me. So, I was smiling on seeing my old picture without a beard. So, welcome here again with this Manav Rachna Happy Times series, and we started this series of happy times to share some happiness, to share some success stories with the students, with the faculty, with the general public at large, who are at this time of COVID listening about depression. They are talking about negative things happening. We are talking about recession. So we thought, let's create a moment where we share our happiness, where we talk about our achievements. And who other than a sports person can guide us on being positive, because a sportsman, he is one individual who fights in each and every match, every day, every morning he's competing. And it is there in the life of a sportsman that every day you don't win a medal. So it teaches an individual how to gracefully accept your win and how to restart once you lose that game. So that keeps you positive, that keeps you going, that keeps you happy, that gives you a new challenge or a new ambition in life. So we thought of building this series of happy times where people can come, people can interact, they can listen with your stories. We can also understand and learn about the personal life of a champion, also talking about the professional life of a champion. How do you maintain a balance with your family? I saw your pictures with your kids, with the family. So how do you maintain that balance? Because once you are at the shooting range demands more time from you as a sportsman. Once you are at home, your family expects the same from you. And would also like to thank everybody from the media. I can see Niru, I can see Kamesh, I can see Vinayak also there, I can see Mr. Raju also there, and so there are a lot of people who are there from the media fraternity. We have our friends from the shooting family, which is the ever-growing family around the world now. So anybody who knows, who asks that, how do you know that individual? We are shooting friends. So that is what a sports gives you. So would like to welcome you again, everyone, on this series for Happy Time, so that next 1 hour we can share our happiness and we can be happy and forget about what will happen tomorrow. Let's celebrate and let's be happy. Thank you, Ritika. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And now it's that time of the show when I'm very happy to share our guest, Russell Mark. Russell is one of the most decorated shooters in the history of trap and double trap shooting sport of Australia and the world. With a gold medal at the Atlanta Olympic Games in '96 and a silver medal in 2000 at Sydney Olympic Games, Russell has proved his mettle by ruling the rankings of this sport for more than 3 decades. With more than 34 world medals, undoubtedly he is one of the greatest shooters we have ever seen. And when it comes to us Indians, he has a very special connection. First of all, I would like to mention that Russell's grandmother was from India. And then he went ahead and coached Colonel Rajavardhan Rathore, who happens to be first individual Olympic silver medalist of the country, who eventually ventured into politics and became the sports minister of the country. And then he went ahead to give the tricks of the trade to Ranjan, who eventually became world number one and made a world record. He was also bestowed with India's highest award, sports award, Rajiv Gandhi Khel Ratna Award. So Russell is a man of many talents. He's a great shooter, he's a coach, he's an author, he's a sports commentator, he's a businessman, and a visionary who has etched his name in the Australian Hall of Fame. Russell, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thanks for having me. That's the longest introduction I've ever had, ever. So I would really appreciate that. Hey, can you just say that again? Can you just say that? Did you just say that Chile's now the sports minister of India? Is that what you said?
That's right. That's right. He ended up becoming the sports minister of the country. Yes, that is right. That is right.
Where he was. Oh, that's a good thing. That's got to be a really good thing for sport in India, that Chile's made it all the way to there. And who knows, he might be Prime Minister one day. But, he was one of the toughest competitors that I've ever shot against. And then, of course, went on to help him get his Olympic medal. So I was very proud to be part of Chile's success. But if everyone just had a touch of what Chile had in his heart, boy, they'd be hard to beat. He was a tough competitor.
So, Russell, I believe that you also own 2 hotels, and we have people from the hotel industry, schools, shooters, sports persons, journalists, and we are going to be asking you a bit of everything. So, tonight is going to be an Indian curry for you. I'm not sure when was the last time that you had one.
Well, it's funny you mentioned it's my great grandmother that was Indian. Her last name was Singh as well.
Oh, really?
I recently for Christmas, as a present, I was given a DNA test. So I did the DNA test, and sure enough, it picked up that I've got a big Indian heritage behind me. So look out.
That's wonderful. That's really, really nice. So, well, Russell, everyone's here, and they want to really know a lot about you. Your journey has been very interesting. From winning a gold at Atlanta Olympic Games and a silver at Sydney Olympic Games. You have been in the real estate industry. You work for the radio. You are a motivational speaker, and much more, which of course we'll cover later. But how did you start, and how did you manage all of that?
Yeah, it's a good question, because you never know where life will take you. I never thought I'd end up owning a couple of hotels, for instance. So I originally started off at school and I had a business degree majoring in real estate valuation. So I worked for the bank industry and valued properties for them. And then I went to the 96 Olympics still as a real estate valuer and won the gold medal at Atlanta. And the night that I won the gold medal, a gentleman from Beretta who managed to get his way into the Olympic Village, and they offered me a professional contract for the next 4 years just to shoot. So I actually made my way to a telephone. This was before everyone had a mobile phone. And I called up my father in the real estate industry and said, look, I don't know what to say, Dad, but a guy has just offered me more money than I can possibly imagine to shoot for 4 years. What do you think I should do? And he said, you should just take it. You don't get those opportunities too often. And I left the real estate industry in 96 to actually start shooting full time for Beretta. And they renewed the contract every year all the way until I actually retired from shooting in 2014. So I was very lucky to be able to turn a sport or a fun pastime hobby it started as into a profession that let me earn enough money that I can invest in things in real estate like hotels. You never know where it ends.
Absolutely. And of course, something that started out as a hobby interested you so much that you ended up actually winning Olympic medals. Like, that's really interesting. That's something, everyone who's listening to us right now can also understand that, yes, as you mentioned, life does take its own turns. And I think with a leap of faith, you should sometimes just take those decisions.
We've got to have a goal. The goal always for me, once I started shooting, was to try and first of all get to the Olympic Games. But once you've been to one, and it was the third Olympic Games I went to before I won it, but when I went to the first Olympics in Seoul, I was just I wasn't disappointed because very few people go to their first Olympics and win, and I was very young back then, but it became then an obsession to try and win an Olympic gold medal, and I was one of the lucky people that finally got that goal to come to fruition.
Well, it's really congratulations for that, and I'm sure that must have been a life-changing moment for you. So Russell, we know that you started from trap shooting and then double trap, and then you shot an American trap and married an American. So which was the most difficult discipline and why?
Marrying the American was the hardest discipline of all, I can assure you.
I thought as much.
She'd be listening somewhere in this house, so I better be careful. A lot of people forget that I actually went to 4 Olympic Games as an Olympic trap shooter, as well as 4 games as a double trap shooter, and for 2 of those games I did both. So my background was in trap, it wasn't in double trap. Double trap wasn't invented until 1989. That was the first time I'd ever seen it, and the first World Championship was in 1990, but I was still very much an Olympic trap shooter back then, but I was always good at shooting doubles. In American trap, one of the main events is an event called double rise. So it wasn't that big a step for me to go from shooting American trap double rise to the Olympic discipline of double trap. It wasn't that hard to do. So I had a background in doubles anyway, and I quickly found out that I was a better shooter at doubles than I was at Olympic trap. And I'd won a few World Cups in Olympic trap and won quite a lot of medals at World Cups, but in double trap, it was just a natural progression. I picked it up pretty easily. And in Australia, I was lucky at the time to have a young guy called Michael Diamond, who was pretty good at both also. And when you've got competitors around you at the level that Michael was at, it was easy for us both to get better at the same time. And that's what I say to everyone. Don't be scared of competition, because it's only competition that will get you better. It's all very well to say you want to be first all the time, but some of the best things you'll ever do will actually be to be beaten by somebody, because it makes you try harder and lets you try and get to the next level. And when Michael Diamond came along, Michael's about 8 years younger than me. All of a sudden, I had somebody who was really world class as a young age then lift me up to another level. And when we both won at the Atlanta Olympics at the same time, it probably wasn't the surprise to him and I. It was a surprise to a lot of other people, but we gradually pushed each other to the level, I think, that we got to in 96 to say that we both went there as favourites and we both won. But it was, that journey was a 6 or 7 year process.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. Thank you for sharing that. You have seen, more than 3 decades of shooting. I mean, how do you think that this sport has evolved in the world from when you started shooting till now?
Well, you could use your country as a good example of that. And don't take this as an offensive comment, but take it for what it is. When I first saw the Indian shooters in the early 80s, they were terrible. They were terrible. Then all of a sudden, at the 1994 Commonwealth Games, a young Indian guy called Mansa Singh, or Joey Singh, that's her wife, he turned up out of nowhere and won the Commonwealth Games for India. And nobody could see where that come from. But then after that, your country's a really good example of, they could see that you've got talented people there and they started to put programs in place. And gradually it's got to what you've got at the moment at the academy that we're at today. I mean, you've got structured programs because you had a base of good people behind you. And when I saw people like Joey Singh winning Commonwealth Games back in 94, it made a lot of us think, well, how many other Joey Singhs are there in India? And it didn't take long to find it. And then, I didn't know Chile Rathore too well until the 2002 Commonwealth Games. And I can remember going to Manchester thinking, I'm a chance to probably win 2 gold medals here because I had Michael Diamond as my teammate in the pairs event. And going into the last round of the pairs competition for doubles, we were 1 point behind the Indian team. And I'm thinking, I know the answer here where Joey Singh is. He's got a lot of other friends. And I said to Michael, don't worry, we'll both shoot a good score the last round and we'll beat these Indians by 5 or 6 points. And we both did shoot very good last rounds, but the 2 Indian shooters shot better last rounds. And to do that under the amount of pressure these Indian shooters were in, I thought, well, okay, we found another one. And Rathore was really a world-class shooter in my mind, from that day on. Because 2 days later at the individual event, I shot virtually a world record score, only to have Chile beat that score by 1 point and then go on in the final and hit 49 out of 50 to knock me back to second place again. And everybody, I think, from that point onward started to think, how many other Indians are out there? And of course, it didn't take long. 2 years later, then Chile won an Olympic medal. And I think people like Chile made the way for people like Ranjan very easy, because Ranjan would look at Chile and think, if he can do it, I can do it. And sure enough, within 4 or 5 years, Ranjan went on, and I think in 2010 and 2011, he shot better than anybody in the world. He won 2 World Cup finals and he won a World Cup gold medal and had the distinction of being one of the few people ever to shoot 50-50 in a final. But Ranjan only got good because Chile got good, and Chile only got good because Joey Singh was good. And that's the structure that you've got in India now. The pyramid is getting broader at the base. And that's what I've seen in answer to your question. And sorry, it's a long answer. But
that's
what I've seen with countries like India, you haven't put all of your eggs in the one basket, where unfortunately in Australia, we did that for a while. And myself and Michael Diamond were probably the 2 guilty people, but we actually stopped the generation of shooters coming through. But in India, I see you've been able to nurture some young talent all the time. And that's really the secret. You've got to have people at the top of the pyramid, but you've got to have a very broad base to keep the people at the top going. And through the different academies and that you've seen in India and other countries in the world copy it now, that's the secret why countries like yourselves have had a lot of success. You've got to have a broad base.
Right. No, thank you. I think you've explained that very well. And here, as we talk about evolution, you were very instrumental to bringing India on the world map as far as shooting is concerned. From Colonel Rajavardhan Rathore winning a silver at Athens to Ranjan Sodhi smashing, one world record after the other. The credit goes to you. So tell us, how tough or easy was it to coach them?
Yeah, it's a good question because those two individuals were very different in their techniques. I thought Ranjan was technically probably a better shot than Chile. I mean, and I hope Ranjan doesn't take this the wrong way because I know he's there listening, but early on in his career, he had a couple of little habits they were habits that he had to get out of. And to his credit, he worked hard at it. And then he got to the stage where he technically was nearly perfect. I mean, he did a lot of things right. And, you know, I think it's nice of you to give me credit for their success, but I certainly don't take it. I think I was more of a mentor to those guys more than anything because both of them were good competitors. They just needed people like myself around them to give them the confidence and the belief that what they're doing is correct. And often that's what I find with a lot of people that I coach. A bad coach is someone that just makes a technical change to somebody just for the sake of justifying their job as coach. The hardest thing in coaching is to actually go up to someone and say, you're actually doing everything right. You just now need to have some belief in yourself and let's go to some competitions and prove it. And I know with Ranjan, once he proved to himself that he could actually be successful outside of India, it was no surprise to me to see him win those events like he did back in 2010 and 2011. And just with a bit of luck, I thought Ranjan could have made the final at the London Olympics. And if he had have got in that final, you never know what could have happened. But it's sad for people. And there's been a lot of Indians that I've coached that were young that have now, without double trap as an event, as an Olympic event, their sort of careers ended abruptly. And unless they've got the desire to cross over and then shoot Olympic trap, it's been sad to see a few of them that have vanished off the face of the earth.
So you did coach both of them and also competed alongside. And then you finally handed Ranjan to Murad Ali Khan, who gave you jitters while driving in 2004 during the pre-Olympic in Athens. How was it to compete and how was that experience? We'd like to hear that from you.
Look, I had a marvellous time at the 2004 Olympics because I actually didn't compete in 2004. I was actually over there working with the Australian Olympic Committee. But look, going back and thinking about all the memories and working with Rathore, obviously, when it was groundbreaking for him and for India to finally crack a medal. There was a lot of pride in the work that we'd done, but, you know, I don't want to take the credit for it. I was personally very proud, but don't underestimate the work that these athletes did behind the scenes. And the hardest part I found with a lot of the Indian athletes, and I think it's probably still the case today, is a lot of them have the belief it's the quantity of training they do, not the quality. A lot of them wanted to spend hours at the range just shooting shot after shot. And the hard part for me, and particularly with Rathore, was telling him to go home. There's nothing really you're going to learn more today than have 3 rounds, make them good quality rounds and go home. But people like Rathore, and there were a lot of others like him from India, they just wanted to spend all day at the range every day. And sometimes that can be detrimental. And I try and get it through everybody's head. It's the quality of the time that you spend at the range, not the amount of time you spend at the range. And in Athens, it was hard because you're limited in the amount of training they give you at an event like the Olympic Games. They just don't let you go there and train all day. And some days they wouldn't open the range, I can remember, for Chile to shoot on. He'd still turn up at the range and find a room to go to and mount the gun for 2 or 3 hours in a dark room on his own. And that was just how he had to be. He felt that unless he went and did 3 hours at the range, he wasn't going to be successful. And I learned that I was never going to change him. That was his army background, and he was so strict in his regime. So you'd let him find a dark room at a shooting range and let him mount the gun for 3 hours until he was nearly exhausted. But I had plenty of fights with Chile about this, but in the end, he got the last laugh because he walked out of there with an Olympic medal. So it was great for the sport. It was not just great for the sport in India, it was great for the sport worldwide because Then India, I think, could see that they'd transcended not just from a massive power in the Commonwealth, which they were anyway, but on the world stage, you then started to get some, and it wasn't long before you had a world champion in Olympic trap, not long after Chile won. So I think Chile opened the door for a lot of people.
Mhm. I think that's very rightly said. It's quality over quantity, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And we also have a lot of young shooters and sports persons who are listening to you and watching us today. So, like you just mentioned, one of the things, like people should sometimes it can be detrimental if you're just focusing on quantity. What are the other qualities or traits would you think are needed to be a champion?
Yeah, and that is a good question. I think you've got to get the technical fundamentals correct to start with. And, again, I mentioned Ranjan, but he learned some bad habits at the early part of his career, and it probably took him 2 or 3 years to get out of them. And once he did, he progressed. But I would have liked to have met Ranjan 2 or 3 years earlier and coached him. And that's the hard part. Unless you've got the coaches in place that can teach the fundamentals, it's very hard because everyone's got a certain degree of natural ability, but there are certain things that you need to do that are fundamentally correct, because under pressure, if you're not doing it correctly, you'll be exposed. And that's the number one thing. Listen to the quality coaches that you've got and get the fundamental things like the stance and how you mount your gun, where you place your gun when you start in relation to the trap house. Do those 3 things right, and you're well on your way. And then probably the best advice is never make excuses. Everyone can make mistakes, but take responsibility of your mistakes. Accept that it is totally in your hands. And it's a very pure sport, shooting. Nothing that anyone else does can really affect the outcome of yourself. But the people that don't succeed in this sport is when they have a bad day, they go and blame everybody else but themselves. And those people, I see them all the time. They have a bad day, they blame what they ate for breakfast, they blame their brothers or their sisters or their parents or their coaches. The last thing they blame is the fact that they actually pulled the trigger at the wrong time. And swallowing pride is very difficult for some young shooters, but the people that succeed are the people that say, that was my fault today. I'm going to learn from what I did wrong and I'll be better tomorrow because I didn't succeed today. Hard trick to learn though.
Right, right. No, very well said. I'm sure everyone has made note of these wonderful points as you've pointed out. And I think that's true quality of a champion, keeping these things in mind. In fact, I was talking to Ranjan in the morning, and he mentioned to me that you would take him to the very range where the conditions were always very challenging, and that his favorite memory was having coffee at the clubhouse. So for those shotgun shooters listening to us, how important is it to train in difficult conditions?
Yeah, Ranjan, I can remember some days at the range at Werribee where it was unbelievably difficult, and it was tough for him mentally. But I always used to say to Ranjan that if you can shoot in this weather here, everywhere else you go in the world is going to be easier. And I'm sure it toughened him up, because when he went back to the range in Delhi, it would have been so easy after competing on the range that we were in Werribee. But it's funny, you talk about the coffee we used to have in the clubhouse talking. One day we were looking out in front of the shooting range, and Ranjan had very good eyesight. And there was a big herd of kangaroos hopping around on the range in front. And Ranjan said, I'd love to go and have a closer look at these. So in my $50,000 car at the time, I drove him up through there and put the biggest rock through the bottom of the sump in the motor of the car, just so Ranjan could have a good look at some kangaroos up close. And we ended up towing our car back onto the road, and I had to get a tow truck to take it back to the city. That's my memory of Ranjan at Werribee, more so than the wind and the coffee we shared together. It was the rock I pulled out of the sump of the motor of my car.
Great. So, with that now, coming to some of your time and memories that you have from India. I mean, You do seem to have a special connection, as we just mentioned in the beginning, with India. And we do know that your grandmother was from here. Do you know where exactly was she from? Did you ever happen to travel to
Yeah,
that place?
from New Delhi, I bet.
Wow.
Absolutely from New Delhi, but I looked in the phone book to see if I could call some relatives, and I looked under the name of Singh, and the phone book was about 20 million pages long of Singh. So,
Okay.
so I never could trace it. But I've got plenty of photographs of her, but it was just interesting to have it confirmed in the DNA. But look, I've had some fantastic times in India. I've coached there a lot. One of the scariest times of my life was in India when Ranjan's little brother drove me to dinner one night in New Delhi. I've never been more scared in my life to jump in a car with Ranjan's little brother. And the second scariest time I've ever had was driving from New Delhi to Patiala to coach up there. That was some trip. I've never had so many cars drive on the wrong side of the road at me for 10 hours as I did that night driving up there. But I've had some tremendous times there and met some great people and was lucky enough to coach some tremendous shooters. And I hope that's not over. There's every possibility that I'll get back to India and do some more of that.
Yeah. In fact, last week we also had your friend, Mr. Peter Wilson, and he had something similar. He came to India with his wife, and he was driving around in this car all by himself. And yes, I think Indian driving, there's a lot of experience on the roads out there for all of you who come here. But sure, would you try that? Would you like driving around on your own next time, now that you're more accustomed to the conditions in here?
Not in a million years, but I won't be driving with Ranjan's little brother either, I can tell you. It's too hard for me. Peter Wilson, that would have been an interesting interview. Did you get a chance?
Absolutely.
Did you get a chance to talk at all, or did you do just Peter talk for 1 hour non-stop?
No, we were able to we were able to talk. We had a very interesting time. It was Peter Wilson, and we had two other guests with us on the show. So yeah, so Russell, while we are talking about you being a coach, we all know that you've been coaching a lot of youngsters and who've done really well. So what you would really do to empower them so that they become world beaters, because we understand that it's a lot to do with the mind and technique. So would you like to share something like that, something on these
Yeah.
lines?
At the moment, I'm coaching two young Australian shooters that are both going to the Tokyo Games next year. Probably two shooters that you're aware of. James Willett, who was world number one at one stage last year, and a lady called Letitia Scanlon. And they're both world class now. But the hard part that we have here in Australia, and particularly now the COVID problem, is that we really do have a lack of competition here. We have to leave Australia. And last year I went over to Italy with James Willett to the Green Cup competition just to get him extra competition. The hard part is finding someone all the time that is better than you. And for any of the young athletes listening now, never be afraid to get beaten. Getting beaten is not a problem. It's not accepting that you can get beaten is the big problem. And with Letitia and James, that's what I've really found with them, is that they fall into the category of two people that never make an excuse when they don't win. But they really do like being up against better people all the time. And that's what you've got to get through to young people that are coming through. And everybody hates losing. No one enjoys that. But the only way that you're finally going to win an Olympic Games is to do a lot of losing along the way. But every time you lose, you'll learn something why you didn't win. And that's what I find with the young people that I'm with now. You get them out of the habit of blaming anything but themselves. And I'm sorry to go back on the point we mentioned before, but it is such an important point. And it's true of any young champion I see, that the people that I see that can do that, they get success very quickly. But they always go and look for somebody to shoot against that they think may be better than them. And if you do that, often you'll get beaten by them, and eventually you'll get over the top. And then you go and find someone who's better again. And that's where I was very lucky, because I had a world-class competitor, as I mentioned, in Michael Diamond, who was competing in both Olympic trap and double trap for many years with me. And it helps that I didn't have to leave the country too often to find someone who was better because I was living right here.
Yes.
And in India, you're lucky enough to have that same issue. You've got a lot of good shooters, but eventually those good shooters have to make their way over to Italy and shoot against their good shooters. And, you know, Italy are such a strong country because they haven't got just 10 good shooters. They've got 100 world-class shooters. You know, and Australia had 3 or 4, and India's probably got 3 or 4 world-class competitors. But, you know, Italy's got 100. To make the Italian team is an incredible effort just to make the team to go to the Olympic Games. And that's what you've got to get through to young people, that don't be afraid of losing, but just don't make an excuse when you lose. But as I said before, it's a very hard lesson for a lot of people to learn.
But it's a very valuable lesson, and I'm
Absolutely.
sure that we will keep that in mind every time, you know, especially for all the young aspiring, you know, students and shooters and everyone who would want to make it to the top one day. But talking about your life, Russell, it would be incomplete to not ask you anything about your family. So what is it like to be married to a shooter, and especially a skeet one?
Well, she talks more than Peter Wilson, so I have to be careful. I only speak when I'm spoken to because Lauren's the boss in this house. No, look, it was great. Obviously, I met Lauren when she was competing for the United States. I actually met her at a competition in Lenato, a World Cup event there. And eventually she came out to Australia just to visit, and she liked it so much, she decided that she'd like to stay here. And then after she'd been here for 2 years, the Australian Commonwealth Games Federation said that you realise that you're eligible to shoot for Australia at the Manchester Commonwealth Games in 2002. And I obviously was going there. And she said, I wouldn't mind doing that. And she went back to the American Federation and said, would it be possible if they let her shoot? And they said, yeah, you can shoot, but you can never come back and shoot for the United States ever again. And that was a hard thing for her to do because her ambition was to make the Olympic team. And obviously she liked Australia, and she just got sick of travelling from Australia to the US all the time for their selection competitions, and ended up taking the spot to go to Manchester, and she won the Commonwealth Games there, and then made the Australian Olympic team for Athens. And she made the final but finished in 4th place. And I guess 4th place is a terrible place to finish for a lot of people because you're not really remembered being the 4th place competitor at the Olympic Games. But she was only young, I guess, and she certainly had an opportunity to keep going. But Lauren then decided that being a mother was far more important to her than being a competitor. And that was really, as soon as we had our first child together in 2005, Lauren probably never ever shot this at the same level ever again. And she decided being a mother was far more important to her than being a competitor and being away from the kids she hated, even though my children did a lot of travel around the world for many years with us. But finally, by 2014, I think it just wore her out. But Lauren still does an enormous amount of coaching and still gets a lot of enjoyment from being involved in the sport in that way. But yeah, it's been an interesting time being married to another shooter, that's for sure.
Great, great. And we also know that you had a surprise wedding ceremony at Hamilton Island. So what was the surprise all about? We'd really like to know.
Well, yeah, it was just prior to the Athens Olympic Games. Boy, you've done your research. I'm really impressed with you. You really have done some research.
Thank you.
You have been hanging out with Ranjan.
Yes, well, I have to admit.
Yeah, we went up there for a holiday, and it was the time to get married because we'd been together for probably 4 or 5 years. And, if I didn't get married that year before the Olympics, it was going to be a whole nother year. So a friend of mine worked for one of the television networks here, and he arranged it all behind Lauren's back. Lauren had no idea she was going there to get married, and they filmed it live, and it was put on television over here live. And even the television station that actually did it, I can remember them telling me just prior to this all going to air, they said, even if she says no, this will be great television. But luckily she said yes.
She said yes.
She said yes, but in the back of their minds, they even thought, yeah, if she says no, this will be a real ratings winner for everybody here. Not for me.
Great. So, I mean, after so many years now, if there's any difference of opinion, do you aim guns at each other or do you amicably settle the matter?
We never talk about Donald Trump. That's what we've decided. Never talk about Donald Trump in our household because it can only end badly. So we just don't talk American politics anymore because Lauren's family is very split down the middle. Half of them are Trump supporters and the other half aren't. And when we went back to America recently, there was an enormous fight in her family when politics was brought up. So now we just don't talk about it at all. And that suits me really.
That's what keeps peace at home then. Yes, great.
Absolutely.
So, with both successful parents at home from the world of shooting, I'm sure, your children have such role models already. So do you think that your children are also wanting to follow your footsteps and they would also like to, shoot one day and make the country proud?
Yeah, look, I get asked that an awful lot, and I wouldn't want to deliberately push them into the sport.
Awesome.
My youngest boy is 13, and he really likes shooting, but his passion is soccer. And while he's got a passion for soccer, I want him to keep playing football. I mean, he enjoys it, and it's good for him. My middle girl she's a very talented shooter, but hasn't really got that competitiveness in her. She doesn't want to compete. She'd rather go up and shoot clay targets against her little brother than probably competing at an Olympic Games. And the eldest girl, it's funny you should bring it up, but she's coming shooting with me for the first time in 10 years this Saturday. She's having a shot. So it's sort of surprised to bring that up. But
yes,
I'll be interested. But they've all got their separate lives, and the pressure they'd have on them, I think it'd be unbearable for them if they started to compete seriously. I don't. If they decide to do it at some stage, that's great. But I put no pressure on them to do it because I don't know if they'd enjoy it.
That's true. But I don't know. I think having such parents and successful, I'm sure one of them is definitely going to eventually follow your footsteps for sure. Well, Russell, we now we also have a lot of people from hospitality who've joined us, and we have a lot of students who've joined this episode. We also know that you're running 2 hotels now. Being from hospitality, I understand it's a full-time business. And so how did you get into hospitality, which is a world in its own self?
Yeah, that's another good question. I was a real estate valuer, as I said, when I went to the Atlanta Olympics in '96. And in the area that I lived in, I had my eye on a block of land that I thought one day would be perfect to put a hotel on it. And when I finally won the Atlanta Olympics, I had an opportunity to earn quite a bit of money quickly. And my father was involved in the real estate industry, and he said, you're earning all this money, you're not actually working anymore in the industry, but what you need to do is invest some money. And he gave me the opportunity to get involved in a business that was building hotels, and he introduced me to 2 of my business partners. And being a real estate valuer, I knew what the block of land was worth. So we ended up buying it, and we got a permit to put a hotel there with a gaming facility, gaming poker machines, slot machines.
Okay.
And it changed my life because all of a sudden I had an interest in something else. And then one thing led to another, and we bought another block of land, and then we built another hotel. But it's like what we said at the start. You never quite know in your life where you'll end up. And I had an opportunity because I won a sporting event. I won an Olympic Games, which gave me money to invest in something else. And, in the long term, the hotel industry is a lot better financial decision for me than shooting clay targets every day of the week, because someone once said to me, the only way you'll make a small fortune in clay target shooting is to start with a big fortune. Sooner or later, it will end up as a small fortune. And it is sort of true because it's very hard to make a lot of money as a clay target shooter. And I've done reasonably well out of it, but I guess the wealth that I've acquired has come out of the hospitality industry. But over here, and I don't know what it's like in India, but our hospitality industry for the last 12 weeks has been closed. It's only just opened up. It's only been 2 weeks ago before we've had anybody come into our hotel. So this part of my life I wasn't prepared for, getting out of the COVID situation and now planning for the hotels to get up and going again. That's something you never train for. Winning the Olympic Games is easy because you've got a set plan and you know what to do. But no one ever told me I'd be faced with some disease that we knew nothing about that would shut down the whole country. And I had 2 businesses that sat there for 3 months and did nothing. But hey, talk to me in 3 months and I'll be better answered for you. I'll know a lot more about how we're going to go in the next part of this. But yeah, it's been a good industry and I've met a lot of good people in it, and I've been able to train a lot of good young people that have started off their careers. It's certainly something that I don't regret doing, but gee, the last 3 months have been tough though, I can assure.
They have been tough for almost everyone across the world, especially, of course, we talk about this industry. With that, I also have one student who was very keen to ask you a question. Let me just quickly check if he's here. Pratik, if he's here.
Yes, ma'am. Hi.
Great. Pratik, good afternoon. Please, you may go ahead a bit louder with your question for Russell.
Certainly. Hello, sir. It's a pleasure to be a part of this session. A question from my side is, what skills and traits you acquire while hiring a person at senior post in your hotel?
What skill? Can you say that again? What skill?
What skills and personality trait you acquire while hiring a senior post?
Sure. Yeah, and it's a great question. In the hospitality industry, it's not the qualifications of the person that walks through the front door I look at the most. It's how they engage with other people. And you can train most people to do anything, but if you haven't got the skill to make a person, when they walk into your hotel in the hospitality industry, if you don't make them feel that they're special, you're not really doing your job properly. And it's something that a lot of people don't believe, but it's really true. If you make someone feel warm and welcome, it's such a nice feeling. You can have the most educated person in the world work for you, but if they don't have the personality type to make that person want to come back next week, then they're really no good working for me. I need that person to make the guest in my hotel feel that they had an experience, and next week, not only will they come back, but they'll bring 2 or 3 friends along. And if you can have that personality trait and make people feel that way, you'll go a long way in the hospitality industry. You don't necessarily have to be the most educated person, but if you can smile and make people feel welcome, then I'd give you a job.
Very beautifully answered, sir. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. I think there's so many hoteliers, so many people from the industry. They were really looking forward. Of course, they've been excited for their part, and I think you answered it beautifully. It's about making people feel happy, being, making them feel special. And that also talks so much about your passion, Russell. We understand that you're so passionate about even, the shooting sport, and that you have your company back there in Australia. You organize a lot of shooting events for corporates, for people. Would you like to share something about that?
Yeah, well, that was actually my wife's idea. Lauren invented that business because in the United States, the corporate shooting business was a very big thing. And when she arrived in Australia, no one was doing it. So Lauren decided that was what she wanted to do. So the hospitality industry for clay target shooting, really, she invented it in Australia. And it's a company now called Go Shooting, and we do obviously a lot of corporate events, and a lot of my coaching now is all based through Go Shooting. And the biggest branch we've had in it of recent times has been making YouTube videos for coaching, because now all of a sudden we're finding the online coaching from around the world, and we're about to launch this in the next 48 hours. That's another branch to our business, will be online coaching, where we're doing, a shooter will give us 3 video clips that specifically are video clips that we ask for. some measurements off their gun, and obviously some technical details about where their gun is shooting. And we're actually now starting to coach people online. And that's how our industry has progressed, because 10 years ago, you never would have thought there'd be anything on online coaching. But I can guarantee you the next 48 hours, if you click onto the Go Shooting website, you'll see our Go Shooting online coaching page is up and going. So it's marvellous how technology has been able to do this. Even what we're doing today, having people from all over the world sit around a computer and learn things. You know, it's a really good thing that we've been able to embrace the technology like.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said. Talking about the different things that you have been pursuing in life, we also, one very interesting thing I found was that you worked with ABC Radio, which is a very famous radio station, for more than 13 years. So, how was it waking up people every day, all those years, and, to add something special to their morning every day? How did you do that?
Boy, Ritika, you've really done your homework. You've really done a good job.
Thank you.
I love the radio. I really did enjoy my time on the radio. And I spent 13 years at the ABC, which is the Australian Broadcasting Commission. And I spent probably another 5 or 6 at one of our big commercial radio stations before that. The only thing I hated was getting up early, because I was doing breakfast radio in the morning.
Yes.
And, when the alarm goes off at 4 a.m., I just hated it. I hated it. I used to love doing the afternoon shows, but the big rating shows are in the breakfast time when people are driving to work. So you had to be there before they got in their car to actually drive. But it was great. It gave me a good insight into not only the sporting world, but how the entertainment industry works. And my eldest daughter now is going into that herself. That is what she's done her degree at university in, and now she's majoring in that. So she obviously liked listening to me, because that's what she's following my footsteps in, is actually in the media, not in the sporting world. Okay.
See, that's the benefit. When you've done so much, everyone at home has more options. But
yeah, exactly.
Great. So, of course, now we've talked so much about shooting, and we've spoken about other things that you've done. We all have grown up seeing the Indian team being dominated, Indian cricket team being dominated by the Australian cricket team. But of late, suddenly you've become submissive to the Indian team. What are your thoughts about that?
Sorry, it broke up a little bit there, Rita. Can you please say that again?
I'm just saying that, all these years that we all grew up, we always saw the Australian cricket team do so well. And, suddenly you've become submissive to the Indian team. What are your thoughts on that?
There's always been a very, very friendly rivalry here in Australia between Australia and India when it comes to cricket. Because obviously here in Melbourne in particular, where I live, we have a massive Indian population. But they are so passionate about their cricket here. It's frightening. If you drive around here in Melbourne in the middle of winter where nobody plays cricket, every single cricket field in the middle of winter is occupied at the moment by Indian cricketers. And it won't be long, Ritika, before the Australian cricket team has, I'd say we're only a generation away before the majority of the Australian cricket team will have an Indian background. Because cricket here in Australia, it's not the same culture that you guys have got there. But we've got so many people that are now Australians with Indian parents, but they will play for Australia. And you'll see in our lifetime, it'll be like 2 Indian cricket teams playing against each other, but one will be wearing the green and gold and one will be wearing your colours. But it's marvellous to see the rivalry that we have. And I enjoyed the rivalry just in the shooting team between the Australian and the Indian team. But, it's also important to note that at the Commonwealth Games, the Indian shooting team has been the biggest medalist at every Commonwealth Game since 1994. You've won more medals than we have. And we hate that. We really hate that. The fact that the Indian, because your rifle and pistol team are so much better than ours. You know, our shotgun shooters weren't bad, but you guys in rifle and pistol dominated us. And you look at the medal tally at the end of every Commonwealth Games, the Indians were always on top. And, you know, I don't like talking about it, but we hated it. And we hated being beaten by the Indian cricket team as well. But it's the sad part when we talk about that, though, that the Commonwealth Games, the shooting's been taken out of it for the next one up at Birmingham. That was really bad. And I believe there's a chance, though, they'll run a separate competition in India, maybe in January of 2022. But I hope they can get shooting back in the Commonwealth Games and we can continue that Australia and India rivalry at the right time.
Great. Thank you. Russell, when I was trying to find out about you, what your life, I really felt that, even a day would be left to try to put everything together and talk about it. But now, of course, coming to my favorite question, because I also have personal interest in reading, we heard that you've written a book, and that is a very big thing. So when did you start writing a book and how did you get this idea about writing a book?
I've had a lot of people ask me over the years to write different things on my behalf, and I've never really liked that. But a few years ago, someone put the idea in that our sport, its history wasn't being recorded correctly. And they put the idea in my head in about 2013 to record who I believe the 20 best shotgun shooters ever to shoot were. And, I knew a lot of these people personally, but a lot of them obviously were long passed away before I come on the scene. But I thought about it, and because I was spending so much time flying on planes, I just started on one trip between Australia and Europe, writing a book on who the top 20 shooters in the world, in my opinion, were. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, within 3 or 4 months, I'd finished that book, and then I was asked to add another 60 names to who would be the top 80, but not write stories on them. Just name 80 shooters in total, but write stories on the top 20. And we put it in. Not a book that went for sale. It was a book that was actually published online, but now I see it everywhere pop up. It was called The Top 20 Shotgunners of All Time. I think that's what it was called. And I enjoyed doing it because it recorded history. And that's a big part of what we don't do in the sport of shotgun shooting. There's very few books ever been written on anything technical in there, and even less on the history of it. So I've got the ball rolling I've written one based on the stories of the 20 best people who I thought have ever held a shotgun. But that's open now to be revised, because someone asked me not more than 2 or 3 weeks ago, if I had to pick the same 20 people, would it be the case? And it definitely wouldn't be. I'd redo that, and there'd be additions to it and edited stories, and that may be the next thing that I do. If this COVID thing went on any longer, it was probably going to be the next very thing I did, because I've run out of other things to do because I haven't been doing anything. But it may very well be something I do. I don't know about a story about myself. I'm probably too much of a private person to do that, although you seem to know an awful lot about me, which worries me. So you've obviously read more than I know, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm ready yet to write a book on myself. I feel more comfortable writing about other people.
Mm-hmm. But of course, listening to you has been very, very interesting and very encouraging, very motivating. I think it was brilliant. It was a wonderful session. I've personally enjoyed so much, and so much to pick up from here. But with that, we also have guests from media who joined us for the session today. And now I would like to request them to please come forward and ask their questions. I would have Ms. Meeru, if you could please ask your question.
Hi, Russell. Before I ask my question, that wine track is very impressive. It was quite distracting behind you. But pardon me for the mask, I'm in the office. But just wanted to ask you a little bit, even though we've had a very strong tradition in shotgun shooting in India, it's going through a slightly down phase, but the likes of Joey and Ranjan are all mentoring and coaching now. As a coach yourself, what would you like to tell these guys, Joey, your friends, Ranjan and Joey, as far as coaching goes, and what is it that they need to do right to be able to get the really good results back again?
Yeah, it's a good question. you have to expose, these coaches have to expose these young shooters to as much competition as they can possibly get. The hard part for a coach is that if you're with the same shooters every day, they become very good on the practice range. But some of them never really learn how to compete. And I've looked at so many shooters over the years that can shoot world records on the day before the World Championship. But the very next day when they're competing in the World Championship, they hit 10, 15, 20% less. And that's because they've never learned how to compete. And you're lucky in India that you've had some great champions that obviously knew how to compete. The only way these young shooters are going to get better is for these coaches to take them to competitions where they know they may be a little bit out of their depth, but in the long run, they'll take one step backwards to take two steps forwards and expose them to as much competition as possible. That's the best answer I can give you on that.
Thank you. Thanks.
No problem.
We also have Kamesh still here with us. We would request him to ask any questions. Case.
That's a pleasure listening to you. We have been hearing about you for many, many years.
Thank you.
Like double trap is not in the Olympics. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, it was a shock in some ways. It was a shock because for the media, for television, double trap was by far the best event for them to cover, because on television it really was a good event as a spectacle for a non-shooting person to come and watch. Unfortunately, I think the International Shooting Sports Federation made a mistake when they took women's double trap out of the program, because we're living in a day of equality now, and you can't just have a men's event without a women's event. It makes no sense why they did that. And that was really the end of it. When they did that, it was a very poor decision, because you can't justify having an event just for men and not one for women as well. What they really should have done is lobbied hard to get the women's event back in, and then I think double trap would have survived. But I don't think there's any place for sexism by any means, and it become a sexist sport, because if you're a female double trap shooter, you couldn't go to the Olympic Games. It made no sense. And in the end, they took men's double trap out as well, which was tragic, particularly for countries like India that had an awful lot of good double trap shooters. Very sad.
Thank you.
No problem.
Next, I would request Mr. Vinayak.
Hi. Russell, you happen to mention that, shotgun shooting is a very pure sport, right? So I just want to know what you make of all those experimentation that is being happening when it comes to qualifications. Now there are mixed team events happening. They have been tweaking a lot of final formats. What do you have to say about that?
Well, sadly, it's all done for television. If you asked any competitor, I don't think any of them like the new format, because the person that hits the most for the day doesn't always win. In fact, most of the time they don't win. But for television, for it to survive, they needed to come up with a format that made the Olympic final worth watching for someone who was a non-shooter. And the old format, unfortunately, and I was guilty of it, and with the Olympics that I won by 6 or 7 points. And for the last 3 or 4 minutes of that telecast, it was boring, because you knew I was going to win it. But on this new format, no one will ever get 6 or 7 points in front, and it will always be decided on the last couple of shots of the day. And that's what I guess the ISSF wanted. They wanted to be able to provide a television broadcast that everyone could look at it, and then the next day they'd say, how about that so-and-so? He missed his last shot to lose the gold medal. Oh, he wouldn't have slept good last night, because everyone would have been talking about it. So this format that they've got now satisfies the television audience, but probably doesn't do a lot for the competitors, because the person that's tried their heart out for 2 days and qualified in #1 position can be the first one out of the final. And that's really, it's sad to see it. And working as a television commentator as I do now for for the TV over here. I like it as a broadcaster, but I often say if I was the person out there shooting, I'd hate it. I'd really hate it. But it is a good question, but it's done only for television. It's for nothing else.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Robin Bose. Yeah.
Hi, my question to you would be, what is your overriding memory of coaching Chile Rathore?
Look, when he got up on the dais to get that silver medal, you could see the relief in his face. And I know he come from an army background. He would have been under pressure all his life. And I can't imagine the pressure that someone would be under in the army when someone's shooting back at you. That is real pressure. But I had the feeling for Rathore, the pressure that not only he put on himself, but a lot of other people put on him, for him to finally go to an Olympic Games and break out of the shackles and win an Olympic shooting medal. I can still remember him on the dais having the relief on his face. I could just see that he'd achieved something, not only for him, but for a lot of other people back home. And I didn't realise then how much it actually meant to me to be a part of it. And it wasn't my medal, it was his medal, but the relief on his face said a lot. And I could sincerely, that's the memory I've got of Rathore, getting up on that dais, getting that chunk of metal around his head and watching him, just all the relief go out of his face. It meant a lot.
Right, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. S. Raju, please.
Good evening, Mr. Rachel. Because this is a happy time talks, so I would like to request you, can you please share one of the finest moments of your life other than winning gold and silver in Olympics, and one moment which you never wanted to recall and wanted to completely erase it from your life?
One that I want to remember or want to forget, are you saying? The happiest time undoubtedly is the birth of your children. I mean, I've had far more pleasure out of my children than I did out of any of the medals I've won at any shooting championship. And I think even though the sport provided me with a way of life that I've really enjoyed, but the best memories I think any parent will have will be watching your kids grow up. At times, that's very stressing, and at times they age you very quickly. But I've had far more enjoyment out of watching what they're doing, and even the sport that they're playing, even though it's not the same sport that I played. I get so much enjoyment out of that, and it's something that obviously I hope happens for a lot longer yet, but it is a good question.
Thank you.
We also have Mr. Abhishek here from...
Hi. Hi, Russell. It was fascinating listening to you all the while. So I just wanted to know, in shooting now we see so many, youngsters, teenagers, especially in air events, and they're coming out there breaking world records, fearless. Also in shotgun, do you think they're rewriting the rules of the game in the sense that shooting is now very much a youngster sport? They're just coming, shooting there, breaking records, and this is all across the world.
Yeah, I don't know if it's actually true though, because you only have to go to the Rio Olympics and see the gentleman that won the double trap gold medal was nearly 50 years old. I mean, he sort of took everybody by surprise that he didn't have to be a 20-year-old coming through. But yeah, I mean, if I was shooting off for an Olympic gold medal these days against someone, I'd rather shoot off against a 50-year-old guy than a 20-year-old guy that knew what he was doing, because the 20-year-old guy's reflexes will be so much better. But I think the coaching is a lot better around the world. I don't think there's much difference in the equipment that people are using. I don't see that there's any one type of shotgun or any brand of ammunition that's changed the way that people shoot, but I think the knowledge that people have and the technology they're using to coach now is a lot better. And, you've got things now that we use a shot camera on a lot of people's guns now. When they're having problems, you attach a camera to the bottom of the gun and you can physically prove where people are shooting or why they're missing certain targets. Well, that technology wasn't around 10 years ago, but now it is. And I think those sort of things have made the younger people learn this sport a lot better. But you still need to expose, as I've said many times in the last hour, you still need to expose these young people to competitions. And that you can't buy experience. And that 50-year-old guy won in Rio because he'd been to 2 or 3 other Olympics and learnt a lot along the way. And it was no surprise to me to see him win finally a gold medal at the age of 49. A tremendous effort. So you can't put a young head on old shoulders. Or an old head on young shoulders. But I would still sooner have someone that's had a little bit of experience, because I know the competition experience is what's going to finally win them the Olympics.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And now I would request for Mr. Ranjan, sorry, to please come and say hello to Russell, because yes, the man who is preventing you from writing a personal book, because yes, we know quite a lot about you through him.
Russell, stop laughing first. Only then I'll speak.
Ranjan, it's good to hear your voice and to see your face.
Yeah. So 5:30 in the morning, I called Russell. It's like, you going to bed, or you just woke up? So
I had to ask that, Ranjan, because I never quite knew which one it would be.
it's so nice it's always so inspirational to listen to you, Russell. Thank you so much for coming to this platform. I have a few questions for you. Okay, so basically, Neeru asked you a question: how are you going to mentor the Indian shooters and the coaches, basically, like we mentoring the shooters and everything. So Neeru, I have to answer this. So there was a 6'3" guy in Berriby range one day, and he was from New Zealand, Kiwi, right? And I told him, good morning, would you like to have coffee? And Russell told me, no, never said good morning to these people. So I was like, what do we say? It's like, whenever you go and offer coffee, say, meh. He almost punched me. So I go to him next day and said, meh, coffee for you. I don't know, Russell, if you remember that. This is a huge, big guy from New Zealand.
I do remember it, but I was surprised that you did.
Yeah. So Russell has been my friend first and then my coach, because he told me the first day I went to him that, Ranjan, you and me need to be friends, and then I'll be your coach. So, the kind of things I share with him, it's, I mean, talking to you today after maybe so many years, it's just nostalgic, and it's so nice to listen to everything that you said, and, just taking me back in the day, and I still have one more question for you. Russell, when was the last time you had this?
Oh, it's a mango.
Yes.
Oh, you know my love of mangoes. I have a real love of mangoes. That's just tormenting me. We don't have them here at the moment, that's for sure.
Darwin. You need to go up north to Darwin.
Yeah, we do.
Last time I had a mango with you was in Darwin.
Darwin, that's correct. You've got a good memory, Ranjan. I like that. You've obviously spoken a lot.
I have a lot of almonds in the morning when I wake up in the morning, with milk.
It's good.
Yeah. It's so lovely to have you, Russell. Thank you so much. And you've not inspired me again, but so many of us.
True.
Thank
Pleasure,
you, Russell.
Ranjan.
Thank you.
Really good to see you.
Yeah. Dr. Abhala would like to, thank you once.
I look forward to coming back and seeing you all there in person, Ranjan.
Definitely, but I'll make sure Biren doesn't drive you. Make sure.
Yeah, please.
I'll make sure that. Don't worry, I'll drive you this time.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right.
Good to
So,
see you,
Dr.
Ranjan.
Bhala, would you like to say?
Yeah, it was really very inspiring, Russell, when you listen to a champion. And I see that this shooting or happy times is not the only area where we can connect with you. Maybe other interesting space where we would like to connect with you someday is on parenting, because we also run schools and universities here. So with parenting today at this time of COVID, how do you handle your kids at home? How do you maintain that relationship at home? I'm sure that most of us are seeing that change of that relationship happening at home. So maybe on the education front as well, we would like to interact with you and hope to see you soon here in India and work on these things where we can build and contribute in building the future of this interesting country, India. Thank you once again for your time and for your inputs. And I'd like to thank everybody from the media who has been here with us and joined us in this series of Happy Time. It was pleasure listening to you, Russell.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Yeah.
And I think before we can actually close the session, we have a request coming to me. There is somebody who would like to say a quick hello to you before we can actually wrap up the session. Daniele, you're parked on the side somewhere. Okay, there you are.
Hi, hello. I'm with Francesco Daniello, the silver medal in Beijing 2008. And we are here, as you can hear, at the shooting range. Good morning. Good morning for everybody.
Good morning. We can't hear.
We can't hear you, Daniele.
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. I did. Also, do you hear us also before or just now?
Just now.
Just now.
Now, okay. So I was introducing Francesco Daniello for people that doesn't know him. And he's a silver medal in Beijing 2008. And we are both big mates of Russell. And there is a competition. Russell, I was listening what you were saying about the removing of double trap from Olympic Games. Very bad. Look, now I'm shooting trap. Francesco now is the new owner of Lunghezza, is a main range in Rome. So now he's working here and he managed everything. And in this moment, there is a competition. As you can hear, the competition running.
Nice.
So in Italy, the situation is more or less much better than before. But after all this, I have a technical question for us. Something that I have to learn. Yeah.
Tell me.
Before the competition. The evening before the competition is better, one glass of Prosecco or one glass of Rosso Bastardo?
You cannot beat Rosa Bastardo. So that's an easy question to answer. A favorite.
We'll see some nice collection of wine at your back, Russell.
We've had some great memories, and particularly at the Green Cup in, what was it? 2012 was probably one of the highlights of my life, that competition.
Yeah.
For all the wrong reasons.
Well, guys, I really do miss all our friendship or our battle on the shooting range. And what to say? Let's go ahead. And I saw, Russell, that you are doing, what are you doing with your school? Sometimes I check your videos, and it's very interesting, the work that you are doing with your shooting school. And thanks to be here with us. And we go to shoot, Francesco. Yeah, we go to shoot.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining, Daniele. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
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 Hey, ciao. Technology, hey? We're in New Delhi 1 minute, we're in Rome the next minute, and now we're...
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
And yes, that's so true. With that, we have come to the end of this very interesting episode of Manav Rachna Happy Times. Russell, thank you so much. It has been a privilege and so much learning to interact with you. And I'm sure same is the case with everyone who's been, listening to us through Facebook and through this medium. We really appreciate you taking out time and inspiring us and motivating us all. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell.
Thank you for having me. We
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed it. And you've asked some very good questions. Your research has been tremendous.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Yes. So I would now request all the guests to please log out. I shall stay and I shall wait for everyone to leave. Thank you.